Hello, hello, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome then to this presentation and thank you in advance for attending this session. Okay, in case you are watching this, it's maybe because I got an issue with my internet connection or something happened. So in case that happens, so at the end, I will write you my email for you to be able to send me comments, suggestions, insights about this project. So that's it. Welcome then to a presentation entitled Teacher Engagement in Critical Research, Insights into Colombian Language Educators' Experiences. I am Camilo Andres Mendez Rios. I'm a student in the Masters in Foreign Language Teaching and Learning from Universidad de Antioquia. And today I will be sharing with you the preliminary findings of this project that I decided to conduct as part of the requirement for having my master degree in language teaching and learning here in Medellin. So thank you again for attending and welcome once again. So what's the outline for this presentation? So for this presentation, I'd like to start by mentioning a little bit about a background about the project. So I'm going then to talk about then the problem statement, but as well, I'm going to talk about a little bit about my personal issues and my personal reasons for conducting this project, which is in alignment with research engagement. And I'm going to explain you that why that's happening. Then I'm going to go a little bit with the theoretical framework. Then I go with the objectives of the project. Then I will talk about the research design. Then I'm gonna go with some insights into teacher engagement in critical research, something very preliminary. And then, okay, I have then this slide for talking about in comments, suggestions, feedback that maybe you can have or you can provide me with in order to improve this project that is ongoing. And okay, let us start. So with the little background first, I like then to talk about me as a language teacher. So as I told you, my name is Camilo Mendez and I graduated from Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas in 2016 as a language teacher. And as a language teacher at undergraduate level, I was not like really interested in learning or doing research just till the point in which I had to decide on a research modality. So that's why with a classmate, we came up with a project entitled A Requisite of Being a Teacher Researcher, in which we decided to research about the perceptions the students had about the research component of the program. Why I'm telling you this? Because from this project, I started being, let's say, curious about this topic about researching. So then what happened then as a researcher? So as a language teacher, I was just interested in focusing more on things related to teaching, things related to how I could be a better teacher for learning about and for teaching as well about the language. But then when it comes to research, something started changing because I started realizing that then it was not just about learning about how to teach the language per se, but it was something else, something more. So I started wondering what I could do. And as a researcher, so I wanted to understand what happened then with teachers when they are teaching, but as well, what happens with teachers when they are researching. Are they still interested in learning about how to teach something, or they are interested in doing something else? So at postgraduate level, pretty much the idea was to unveil, to understand, to explore what happens with in-service teachers when they are teaching, but when they are researchers as well. That was my pretty much my concern. And then when it came to talking about this, I had to decide on perspective. So I was not really interested in critical perspectives, or I was not very well aware of which perspectives you could opt for when it comes to doing research. But having the experience of having contact with the master's program, having contact with different teachers and professors, and as well my personal experiences as a teacher researcher, I understood that there are some perspectives and that I'm interested in a critical perspective, in understanding what happens with criticality in our field. And why I'm telling you this, maybe you are wondering, well, this is not actually part of the project, but I think it's very important because some authors mentioned that when it comes to talking about engagement, uh, the researchers usually do not report on how their engagement was, and they just report on how the participants were engaged in research, but not actually how they were engaged. And I think that this diagram, this graph, pretty much represents the sort of engagement I'm trying to have now, which is like, okay, it has been a path, it has been like from being concerned about teaching, being concerned about researching, and then concerned about a specific perspective on research. And that's pretty much what my engagement and how my role as researcher has been since I graduated from Universidad Distrital when I was at undergraduate level, and now that I'm at a postgraduate level. So how then this issue is happening. And about the problem statement, about the project itself, so good. I can say that in Colombia, there are many inequalities in society and education. That's according to the OECD in 2016. So then, if there are inequalities in society, what happens then? Producing research that leads to social justice and equality is paramount in Colombia. That's some authors have mentioned that, and I pretty much believe, I truly believe that's what is needed in Colombia. So then, if we need then a research that leads to social justice and inequality, so then what happens with language teachers? So then for language teachers, fostering the production of professional development strategies to language teacher educators related to critical research could make these teachers power literate who move beyond contemplation and complaint to more concrete actions. That's something that was mentioned by Granados in 2018 in a wonderful article about revisiting the need of criticality in our field, and specifically in teacher education programs. So considering this, the idea is fostering these professional development strategies conducive to change and fair opportunities for students, teachers, and society in general. So considering those ideas and this ideal world in which critical research is presented, or a critical perspective in which we talk about social justice and inequality and producing changes, what happens then in our context? So nonetheless, researching from a critical perspective must be approached realistically. Why? Because some authors mention that teacher research has challenged language teachers' research notions, and more specifically, what they research about. That's something that is called, that is mentioned by Borg. So then, even though critical research or doing research in general is something very positive for teachers, teachers still perceive that that's something very demanding, that's very difficult to do. So, okay, even though it's good, it's difficult. As well, Borg mentions that on teachers' conceptions of research and powerful potential for PD. So then in this part, Berg mentions that then these conceptions that teachers have are, as I was telling before, something very difficult, but even though it's difficult, it has a powerful potential for professional development of language teachers. And because we have like these two-sided perspectives on teacher research, so he calls this a paradox. Why is this a paradox? It's a paradox because on the one side, this is something very positive, doing teacher research, having teacher researchers, but as well on the other side, so these teachers believe it's difficult, it's something that they cannot do, it's something that they have not been trained for example. So, okay, that's then a paradox. And considering then that paradox, what happens specifically in Colombia? So, for professional development, there's a prevalence of top-down approaches in professional development initiatives for language teachers. There are some authors that have mentioned that, in which this top-down approach, basically, some people tell teachers what to do and how to do and what to teach, which is making teachers passive agents of the process, of the teaching and learning process of of English, in this case, in Colombia. But as well, on the other side, just among many reasons, we have that there's a growing number of events where language teachers can share their investigative experiences, and a growing number of publications and projects language teachers produce in their own educational settings and ELT field in general as well. I have to say that for this part, there is a growing number of studies that draw on critical perspectives as well. So, okay, even though then this prevalence of top-down approaches, like people are reacting, teachers are producing more research, critical or not, but they are producing more research, and that's it. That's why I perceive this situation as the paradox that Borg mentions very well. So then, considering this paradox here in our context, so what we can do? So, okay, in addition to the paradox as well, in Colombia, there are so many challenges presented related to the current socio-economical and political conditions, such as perpetuating power by a specific political parties. There are unequal opportunities for Colombians, so people do not have access to education, for not mentioning so many other basic things that people are supposed to have access to. And as well, we have so many things related to violence in different parts of the country. So, considering those issues, the paradox, considering the challenges presented in Colombia, so what is needed? Is needed then language teacher capable of promoting changes leading to social justice, hopefully, and it's also necessary for researchers definitely to rethink research goals in ELT due to the quarantine and lockdowns caused by the pandemic COVID-19. I think that's something that is not just related to research, but in general terms. In then in every single scenario we can think of. So I think that the COVID-19 has caused many changes and many challenges in different parts. So considering all these issues, so then critical teacher research is presented as the possibility for teachers to promote then these changes to make their students think about something different and just like think out of the box, if we want to say that. So that's pretty much the problem, then the problem statement. So just like to sum up, the necessity of exploring how language educators engage in critical teacher research, considering that, okay, so then considering all these issues that I mentioned before, So then critical research is paramount due to the following reasons. So existing literature related to engagement in research has been approached by using quantitative research methods aiming to find generalizations, and I have over there some examples. So I think that as something qualitative is really needed to understand how teachers engage in critical research, because it's already there, but we don't really know then how people do it or the reasons they have to do it. So, okay. As well, Colombian literature about teacher research has focused primarily on teacher education, which is amazing. But as well, I think that it's needed to explore a little bit more in detail what happens with in-service teachers. As well, no studies in ELT in Colombia, to my knowledge, intend to understand how language teacher researchers engage in critical teacher research. To how they engage specifically in this perspective of teacher research. And finally, due to the tendency for both pre and in-service language teachers to receive some research training in Colombia, it becomes relevant to examine how language educators who know about research procedures and methodologies engage in critical teacher research and the reasons why they don't. So that's pretty much then the problem statement that I can tell you about in this project. So considering that, then what's then the theoretical framework I am drawing this study on? Okay, first I'd like to give you a quote that I think it's very relevant for the topic that I'm trying to understand, which is about the definition of critical research. And in this case, Magales and Fidalgo in 2019 proposed that critical research must be an attempt to confront unfairness, an effort to implement dialectical relations, allowing for world contradictions to come forth and domineering cultural features to be challenged. So this is a very interesting definition of critical research because it tackles the issues that I think that everyone has in mind when talking about critical perspectives on research, which is to change, to talk about issues of unfairness and talking about cultural features and that what needs to be challenged about those cultural features, about the place we are working with. So good. This, for me, this is one of the most accurate definitions for me, for my personal opinion, about critical research. But there are so many perspectives about this. And okay, we're talking about then the research engagement. So I'm going then to talk about what is research engagement and critical teacher research. So those are going to be the two main themes for the theoretical framework I'm about to present. So for that, I'm going then to present pretty much a mind map, like very quickly, about what is first critical teacher research, and then I'm going to explore a little bit more in detail what is engagement. So for critical teacher research, there are some authors as McLean in 2009, Cochran, Smith and Little, Shonan Morgan, West and Crooks, White. There are so many authors talking about these critical perspectives on research, but mainly all of them agree on this, which is that the purpose of CTR is not only on teaching the language itself, but also on achieving social justice, fostering equity and fair opportunities for students. Rethink practice, question your own assumptions, challenge the status quo, social change, among many other objectives. But that's pretty much that, like doing this research for tackling those very important issues that need to be understood in the context of language teachers. And then what does it imply? So it implies that teachers are not just consumers of knowledge, but producers of it, which is something that was mentioned by Kumarabadivelu in 2013. And then considering that teachers from a social and political perspective deliberate about what gets done, why to get it done, who decides and whose interests are served. Therefore, critical teacher research represents a desirable bottom-up approach for professional development. So previously I was mentioning that in Colombia, there are so many professional development initiatives, but from a top-down approach. So now talking about bottom-up approaches for professional development definitely could help teachers to be producers of knowledge, to change their submissive positions, as some authors have mentioned in some wonderful articles about this topic. So then what happens specifically in ELT and then these critical perspectives? So John and Morgan explained the existence of a critical turn in ELT, where the primary purpose consists of transforming traditional practices and habits of thought into and outside the classroom. This is very important because then the labor of the researcher, of the teacher researcher, is not just to do something specific in the classroom, but to produce an impact outside the classroom, which is one of the primary purposes of these perspectives as well. And particularly, critical teacher research seeks to transform local communities, society, and the larger world by expanding the practical field, only teaching what I was mentioning you before. The teachers at the very beginning, they just tend to focus on how to improve my teaching. And then they go beyond that, and then they explore topics related to social justice and socio-historical conditions of the schools. That's something as well that was mentioned by Cochrane, Smith, and Little in 1999. So it is almost 20 years old, this perspective. But something very interesting is that this is relatively new nowadays. So then, if we talk about then this critical perspective, so what kind of critical? What is then critical about? So then, according to Basabe, in one article that he has about engagement and critical research, so he mentions that there are three perspectives on critical in ELT. So critical could be related to questions of power and inequality. So then teachers who are into this critical perspective, so then they are focusing their research projects, their work on these issues. Critical as well could be related to transforming social inequality. So, okay, so then in this perspective is about transforming, changing, questioning in the first one, transforming in the third one, and critical. Critical could be as well crucial in the sense that it's important. Why? Because we're creating critical consciousness. So if the purpose is to make students aware of something, that could be then the critical perspective that the teacher is having for doing their teaching. And how is it done? So, okay, McLean in 2009 states that authors who follow a critical perspective on research focus on aspects such as emancipation, enlightenment of movements conducive to a fairer and democratic society. That's the final end of it. And then through criticality in ELT, Penny Cook has cited in Basabe in 2019 proposes that in ELT we have then two ways to explore then these critical approaches. So then the first one is with critical pedagogies, in which the focus is on relating the classroom with its context to favor transformation. Some examples of it: when teachers conduct studies related to gender, ethnicity, social class, coloniality, and other power issues, critical approaches to narrative inquiry, or critical ethnography, critical media literacy, critical text analysis, and critical pedagogy, among others. This is just a few of those examples in which we can talk about critical pedagogy. And about critical thinking, okay, so it aims at developing students' skills in terms of logics and decision making, and examples of it, so the Bloom's taxonomy. So those are then the ways in which critical could be approached in our field, which is English language teaching. So, okay, that's related to critical. And now what happens with engagement? So good. So for engagement, so some authors have mentioned that when it comes to talking about research engagement, so we have two ways in which we can approach this. research engagement in or with. And when we talk about research engagement in research, so when teachers do research, and engagement with research, when teachers read research. That's like in general terms, the difference between in and with. And either in or with, it emerges from the teachers' need to grow up professionally, and they have some reasons to be then engaged in research, either in or with, but it could be facing problems to find solutions or at least giving clues about what could be improved. We have something that is enabling, which resides in the idea that when researchers share their work, they enable others to learn from that, which is, I think this is an example, a good example of enabling, maybe. Not just this presentation, but in general terms, the conference this year, and in general terms, all the conferences that we can attend. Another reason, having more preponderant roles in their teaching contests and quit their submissive positions, which is something that is elemental for critical research. Social networking, of course, getting to know other teachers, getting to know the work done by others as well. Become more critical, reflective, and analytical about their teaching. That's as well another reason. Another reason could be empowering teacher researchers to work for the benefit of their students. And as well, another reason is because it may give them insights into their teaching and provide them with context-relevant practices by reading what other teachers are doing. This is specifically about research, engagement with research. And then, what could be then the benefits of being research engaged? So then we have that the benefits could be make sound, autonomous, professional judgments, strengthen teachers' intellectual capabilities. They can develop feelings of empowerment, and they can have as well opportunities for professional development. So then, through critical teacher research engagement, so we could foster then this production of more critical teacher research oriented in our contest, as I was mentioning before. So then to understand engagement, and this is very important because that's gonna be the issue, the cornerstone of my project, which is then to understand engagement. What are the issues that we need to understand to be able to talk about then engagement? So we have teachers' conceptions on research, good quality research characteristics, reasons to do or do research, role of research in professional development, how both teachers and students become question askers and problem posers, challenges or negative experiences teachers have when conducting research, role or position of administrators towards their work as researchers, and contextual factors as full-part teacher researchers in an institution. Just the last one is just like to give you for instance. So those issues are the ones that I'm going to try to understand from the project that I'm about to that I'm conducting, and pretty much my data collection instruments are gonna be related to explore those issues of engagement, the ones that I told you before. So good, then what's considering then the theoretical framework, the problem statement? What's in the research question and what are the objectives? So for the research question, how do Colombian language educators engage in critical teacher research? And to answer that question, so I have specific objectives that I have proposed. So to identify language teachers' conceptions of critical research, to identify characteristics of good quality critical teacher research, to identify the reasons why language teachers decide on conducting critical teacher research, to identify challenges teachers experience when conducting critical teacher research, and to identify how critical teacher research has an impact on the professional development of language teachers. So those are then the objectives and the research question I have for this project. So talking about in the research design. Good, so then it pretty much follows the principles of qualitative research, because the idea is to try to understand from rich to have a rich understanding of the situation of these teachers and specifically the experiences they are talking about. This is as well as exploratory case study. In this case, the case is the engagement that these students, that these teachers, sorry, that these teachers demonstrate to have towards critical research. So the case is the engagement of these teachers, and this is exploratory because I don't have predetermined outcomes. I have what the theory says about conceptions of research, reasons for doing or not doing research, and impact on professional development. But I have that just for teacher research, but not for critical teacher research. So I'm exploring what happens when it comes to critical teacher research about these issues. And about the participants, I decided to follow this perspective called purposeful sampling, proposed by Creswell in 2001. In this purposeful sampling, the idea is that the researcher in advance decides on a specific criteria for him or her to decide or to make invitations to invite people to participate as long as they fulfill the specific requirements that the researcher things are convenient for the purposes of the project. So in my case, I have I have proposed like these general characteristics, like Colombian language teacher researchers, as well. The other feature that I'm considering is that teachers have conducted research projects that have followed critical perspectives. That's really important because since the idea is to understand their engagement in critical research, so it's important that they have conducted projects following this perspective. Of course, that they are willing to participate. I think this is this is a basic requirement. And as well, I want to tell you that so far I count on 8 participants who have been part of the project by means of a survey that was sent to them on their emails, or I send them a direct invitation telling them as well that I read a little bit about their work and that I would be very interested in having them participating in the project. As well, I make an exploration of some of articles in different Colombian journals, and I was analyzing if they follow a critical perspective, and I sent as well these direct invitations to the authors of the articles that I could see were following a critical perspective. And as well, in the master's project, so I knew as well some people that they were working with critical perspective. So as well, I extended the invitation to them as well. So then for the data collection instrument, so I pretty much count on 2 instruments. So I'm considering the documents and in-depth semi-structured interviews. By documents, I mean the research products or projects that the participants have done, because since they have been conducting some research projects, so they have a product to show. In most of the cases, so they are master students, but well, actually no master students, they are alumni, they are magisters. So for doing and for completing their master's degree, so then they were doing some thesis as well. There are some others that have written some articles after they graduated from the master's or even before they started the master's degree. So this is a commonality among them that they have pursued master degree studies, but but it's not like a requirement that I was proposing. It was just that it emerged. Okay. And about concerning trustworthiness, the strategies member checking and external audit proposed by Creswell would be applied to member checking right after I finish the section of the findings. So then I will be sharing with my participants the findings to validate if I'm actually portraying the ideas, the experiences that they shared with me in their in the interviews we were having. And as for ethical considerations, so I sent them different consent forms in which I mentioned issues of confidentiality, in which my research advisor and me are the only ones who are going to have access to the identities of the participants. As well, I mentioned there that the participation is voluntary and that participants can withdraw at any moment if it's what they want to do as well. And that's pretty much it. I hope then to find like your comments, your suggestions, your insights about in the project. I really hope that I can attend that day, but in case it was not like that. So okay, I think that um, we can be in contact, and I will be willing to answer your questions, your comments, and whatever thing that you can tell me about the project. I will be honored to receive your feedback. Thank you so much for attending. It was a delightful pleasure to have you here listening to this presentation. And okay, thank you so much.